I could have listened to that for another 5 hours, as I'm sure all of you could have done. But sadly, we do have other speakers. But my goodness, someone with passion, with his heart in the right place, and doing amazing things. Amazing. So, on the 7th of August, 1914, in order to avoid a run on the banks, the Treasury issued Treasury notes signed by John Bradbury, a form of national credit backed by the credit of the Union. So, Justin Walker is now requiring, as we all are, I think, that the Treasury immediately restarts issuing interest-free money based upon the wealth, integrity, and potential of our country. So this would remove the hold that the banks have over all of us. So, big round of applause for Justin, please.
Well, hello everybody. Guy, you're not an easy guy to follow, are you? Bloody hell, I've got to follow a hell of an act there. Let me first of all just explain, I have an apology. I am not an economist. Now, Frederick the Great, bless him, he felt that he would serve his country well if he strung up a few lawyers. Because because he felt that it would actually encourage the others to serve the nation. Well, I'd like to string up a few economists, just to get them into line, because there's something very wrong out there at the moment. They know it, we know it, and just as Guy has exposed what's going on in the courts, we have now exposed what's going on in the banking system. So, okay, let's roll. I did this presentation to Trinity College, Cambridge, to the Mensa Summer Gathering, which is fantastic because basically I am a guy who barely scraped together 2 A-levels. My mother has me down as a late developer. My wife has me down as a very late developer. And it's rather nice that I can now say I went to Mensa and educated them. So bear with me, I hope this works, but here's the title: The Bradbury Pound, Globalisation and the New World Order. Okay, there's 70 odd slides. I'm going to be quick, bear with me. Right, serious note. This is the result of today's global banking and financial system for almost half of humanity. And there, if you can see, is a little boy pouring water into a bucket. Makes me choke every time. Okay, and this. This is the reality of the global international money markets. And this. These are human beings. And in our country. 1 million people using food banks. It's getting worse. Okay, these are some of the basic facts you need to know. Nearly half of the world's population, more than 3 billion people, live on less than $2.50 a day. More than 1.3 billion live in extreme poverty, and that's less than $1.25 a day. 1 billion children worldwide are living in abject poverty. As a direct result, 22,000 children die each day. And this is from UNICEF. The 85 richest people in the world have as much wealth as the 3.5 billion poorest. It's mind-boggling. Almost half of the world's wealth is now owned by just 1% of the population. The wealth of the 1% richest people in the world amounts to $110 trillion. That's 65 times the total wealth of the bottom half of the world's population. Okay, that's the contrast. Stark reality. Children making a living out of a rubbish tip, the luxury yachts, mainly owned by bankers, in Monte Carlo. In fact, I was there 2 years ago, and I have to say, it turned my stomach to walk around them. The system has failed, it is inhuman, it is immoral, and it has to go. Humanity both demands and deserves better. However, the essential truth about how this banking and financial system actually works is not widely known. But thanks to insider whistleblowers, and again, I take my hat off to the whistleblowers, and hard-working money reformers, some of us now have a much greater understanding of what is going on. Hang on, am I clicking? Yes, there we go. In a nutshell, this is how the private international banking works today. Historically, the banks have given themselves the right, courtesy of corrupt and inept politicians across the globe, to be allowed to create money completely out of thin air as interest-bearing debt. The term is used as the polite term is fractional reserve lending. They have then used this fraudulent means of money creation to put countries, communities and families into unsustainable debt. Here are some quotes from history that expose and confirm just how unfit for purpose and how immoral this global banking and financial system has become. And trust me, when I did these at Mensa, they were fascinated. Permit me to issue and control the money of a nation I care not who makes its laws, attributed to Meyer Amschel Rothschild. I care not what puppet is placed on the throne of England to rule the empire. The man that controls Britain's money supply controls the British Empire, and I control the money supply. Again attributed to another Rothschild, Baron Nathan Meyer Rothschild. US President Thomas Jefferson. I sincerely believe that banking institutions having the issuing power of money are more dangerous to liberty than standing armies. Again, Thomas Jefferson. If the American people ever allow private banks to control issue of their currency, first by inflation, then by deflation, the banks and the corporations will grow up around them, will deprive the people of all property until their children wake up homeless on the continent their fathers conquered. The issuing power should be taken from the banks and restored to the people to whom it properly belongs. Napoleon Bonaparte, Emperor of the French. When a government is dependent upon bankers for money, they and not the leaders of the government control the situation, since the hand that gives is above the hand that takes. Money has no motherland. Financiers are without patriotism and without decency. Their sole object is gain. Major Lawrence L.B. Angus, from one guy well known in history to someone we'd never heard of, author of Slump Ahead in Bonds, but he was very popular at the time. The modern banking system manufactures money out of nothing. The process is perhaps the most astounding piece of sleight of hand that was ever invented. Banks can in fact inflate, mint and unmint the modern ledger entry currency. Sir Josiah Stamp, President of the Bank of England in the 1920s and the second richest man in England. Banking was conceived in iniquity and was born in sin. The bankers own the earth, take it away from them, but leave them the power to create deposits, and with the flick of a pen, they will create enough deposits to buy it back again. However, take it away from them, and all the fortunes like mine will disappear. And they ought to disappear, for this world would be a happier and better world to live in. But if you wish to remain slaves of the bankers and pay for the cost of your own slavery, let them continue to create deposits. Reginald McKenna, chairman of the Midland Bank, addressing stockholders in 1924. I am afraid the ordinary citizen will not like to be told that the banks can and do create money. And they who control the credit of a nation direct the policy of government and hold in the hollow of their hand the destiny of the people. Captain Henry Kirby, MP, a decent MP, that this House considers that the continued issue of all the means of exchange, be they coin, banknotes or credit, largely passed on by cheques by private firms as an interest-bearing debt against the public should cease forthwith, that the sovereign power and duty of issuing money in all forms should be returned to the Crown, then be put into circulation free of all debt and interest obligations. Henry Ford, founder of the Ford Motor Company. It is well enough that people of the nation do not understand our banking and money system, for if they did, I believe there would be a revolution before tomorrow morning. President Andrew Jackson. I am one of those who do not believe that a national debt is a national blessing, but rather a curse to a republic, inasmuch as it is calculated to raise around the administration a moneyed aristocracy dangerous to the liberties of the country. And I love this. You are a den of vipers and thieves. I have determined to rout you out, and by the eternal, bringing his fist down on the table, I will rout you out. President Andrew Jackson, again, from the minutes of a White House meeting with the promoters and directors of a second private bank in the United States. In other words, the bankers were trying to creep back in. Now, This is a lovely one, the real truth of the matter is, as you and I know, that a financial element in the largest centres has owned the government ever since the days of Andrew Jackson. That's Franklin D. Roosevelt. Now, this is a nice chap. Everyone's granddad. Isn't he a nice chap? Montague Norman, Governor of the Bank of England, 1920 to 1944. Now, I want you to pay particular attention to this quote. It's a bit of a long one, but please go with it. Capital must protect itself in every possible way, both by combination and legislation. Debts must be collected, mortgages foreclosed as rapidly as possible. When, through process of law, the common people lose their homes, they will become more docile and more easily governed through the strong arm of the government applied by a central power of wealth under leading financiers. These truths are well known among our principal men, who are now engaged in forming an imperialism to govern the world. By dividing the voter through the political party system, we can get them to expend their energies in fighting for questions of no importance. It is thus by discreet action we can secure for ourselves that which has been so well planned and so successfully accomplished. Okay, so let's go back to basics. What actually is money? Now, I've been working with a network of people who have been money reformers, many of them quite elderly, and they are looking to us now to pick up the thing and run with it. Okay, this is the definition that we accept. Money is simply a convenient unit of exchange for goods and services that people have complete confidence in. As I said, I'm no economist, but I can understand that. Okay, there's old Henry I and his tally sticks. All these items have been used as money. Tally sticks, cowrie seashells. If you want to see some, I've actually got some in my bag. I might buy tonight's meal with some. That could be interesting. Clam shells, tobacco leaves, salt, peppercorns, beads, carved rice stones, beaver pelts, and finally hemp. So all these things have been used by societies around the world for money. Colonial scrip. How many people have heard of colonial scrip? Right, okay, that's a few more hands than I had at Cambridge. Excellent. Right. I don't know what that means, but go on. Okay. This is a quote from founding father Benjamin Franklin explaining to the Bank of England directors his ideas on why the colonies were so prosperous in 1763, as quoted in the Money Masters. In the colonies, we issue our own money. It is called colonial scrip. We issue it in proper proportion to the demands of trade and industry to make the products pass easily from the producers to the consumers. In this manner, creating for ourselves our own money, we control its purchasing power and we have no interest to pay for no one. Now, I suggest to you that's our future. And it's also interesting that when you look at the history books, you're always told about, no taxation without representation, and we'll dump the Boston tea and all that stuff. This was the real reason why the colonists had to be brought back into line. The Bank of England and the City of London could not have these damn colonials issuing and controlling their own money supply. Now, I bet you've not heard of this one. How many have heard the Guernsey monetary system? Clever Dick. Right. Okay. After the Napoleonic War, Guernsey was quite poor and they needed to rebuild their warehouse and their quays and basically get back into trade and so forth. And, they had the labour and they had the materials, but they didn't have any money. So they went to the governor and he said, well, hang on a moment. You've got the materials, you've got the labour, right. Start issuing your own paper money. So they did, and it worked. And then, of course, the Bank of England got to hear about it, and same again as the poor old colonial scrip, and it got stopped. But it worked. Okay, now you've all heard the greenback dollar, haven't you? Yes. Right. Okay, the story of the greenback, I'm not going to go on too long about it, but I love this quote from Abraham Lincoln. I have two enemies, the Southern Army in front of me and the financial institutions in the rear. Of the two, the one in the rear is my greatest foe. What happened was, after the first Battle of Bull Run, the northern US Army, the Union, were running out of money, and they went, oh my God, what are we going to do? Well, Colonel Dick Taylor of Illinois, got to just check his name, Colonel Dick Taylor of Illinois, went to the president and said, my dear old president, you can actually issue your own money, because the president and his cronies had gone to the bankers, mainly in Europe, City of London and so forth, and they were offering loans at 24, 28, 36%, and they said, no, we're not. Basically, Lincoln was determined not to put his nation into a debt noose, so he came up with this idea of issuing money based on the, now I think it was not based on the credit of the nation, it was based on the honour of the American government, which, yeah, if it was based on the honour of our present government, it wouldn't do too well. Anyway, but this is what he said. Now, this is a very interesting, this is from the Senate document 23, 1865. The government should create, issue and circulate all the currency and credit needed to satisfy the spending power of the buying power of consumers. The privilege of creating and issuing money is not only the supreme prerogative of government, but it is the government's greatest creative opportunity. By the adoption of these principles, the long-felt want for a uniform medium will be satisfied. The taxpayers will be saved immense sums of interest, discounts and exchanges. The financing of all public enterprises, the maintenance of stable governments and ordered progress, and the conduct of the Treasury will become matters of practical administration. The people can and will be furnished with a currency as safe as their own government. Money will cease to be the master and become the servant of humanity. Democracy will rise superior to money power. I think those two last sentences are very powerful. Now, the Times of London, 1865. If that mischievous financial policy, which had its origin in North American Republic, should become indurated down to a fixture, I love that phrase, then that government will furnish its own money without cost. It will pay off debts and be without a debt. It will have all the money necessary to carry on its commerce. It will become prosperous beyond precedent in the history of the civilized governments of the world. The brains and wealth of all countries will go to North America. That government must be destroyed, or it will destroy every monarchy on the globe. Well, we all know what happened to poor old Abraham Lincoln. The assassin's bullet got him. Now, I'm not going to say whether that's connected with what was going on, but a lot of people believe it was. Now, we have Executive Order 1110, and this was John F. Kennedy standing up to the bankers and the Federal Reserve by bypassing the Federal Reserve by issuing 4.3 billion in Treasury notes backed up by the silver bullion. And I found this quote on YouTube. I can't say if it's authentic or not, but he is supposed to have said, "There's a plot in this country to enslave every man, woman and child. Before I leave this high and noble office, I intend to expose this plot." President 7 days before his assassination. I know there's an awful lot about the obviously assassination. I'm not going to get involved in that, but what I'm saying is it rings true. So who makes up this very powerful hidden hand that operates in the shadows and influences governments? Now, they are a tiny group of self-appointed, low empathy megalomaniacs who are using stealth, deception and entrapment to carefully steer the human race into accepting corporate global governance on their terms, terms which are clearly Orwellian and which now involve the rapid enslavement of humanity. And trust me, the end game has started. The New World Order. You've all heard of these groups: the Bilderberg Group, the Trilateral Commission, the Council on Foreign Relations, European Council on Foreign Relations, the Pilgrim Group, the Committee of 300, Skull and Bones, Bohemian Groves, and there are many others. Now, nice chap, isn't he? Like to have him as your granddad. Right. Some even believe we, the Rockefeller family, are part of a secret cabal working against the best interests of the United States, characterizing my family and me as internationalists, and of conspiring with others around the world to build a more integrated global political and economic structure. One world, if you will. If that's the charge, I stand guilty, and I am proud of it. David Rockefeller. And then he went on, "We are on the verge of a global transformation. All we need is the right major crisis, and the nations will accept the New World Order." Now, this is a very interesting book to read. Tragedy and Hope, A History of the World in Our Time, Macmillan Company, 1966, by Professor Carroll Quigley of Georgetown University. And he was a mentor for Bill Clinton. That should say a lot. Now, I better explain, he was actually on the inside but he wrote a lot which exposed what he was on the inside, and he seemed to get away with it. And he wrote this: "The powers of financial capitalism had another far-reaching aim, nothing less than to create a world system of financial control in private hands able to dominate the political system of each country and the economy of the world as a whole. This system was to be controlled in a feudalist fashion by the central banks of the world acting in concert, by secret agreements, arrived at in frequent private meetings and conferences. The apex of the system was the Bank for International Settlements in Basel in Switzerland, a private bank owned and controlled by the world's central banks, which were themselves private corporations. The growth of financial capitalism made possible a centralization of world economic control and use of this power for the direct benefit of financiers and the indirect injury of all other groups." And here we have the Tower of Basel, the Bank for International Settlements. What can you say about this place? I mean, 10 times a year, 10 of the most influential central bankers, including our own Bank of England and the Federal Reserve, and obviously you need the European Central Bank, and you'll have the French Central Bank, the Japanese, the Italian, the German, etc. They meet, and they meet in the top tower, and I think I've got a, there we are, no, it's not showing up, there it is. Up there, somewhere up there, there is a beautiful, sort of like a circular office. Well, basically they sit down to dinner. It's a bit, you can almost imagine, it's like a James Bond thing. They're all stroking white cats, you know. But in fact, they are controlling the world's money supply. Or more accurately, they are taking orders from the Rothschilds, the Rockefellers, the Warburgs and others. But this essentially is where the world's money supply is decided upon. So which countries fall, which countries benefit, etc. It's all based there. It is a completely, even though it's based in Switzerland, nobody can touch it. It's got diplomatic immunity. It was set up in 1930. It was pro-Nazi. I mean, the whole thing, it's just appalling. And yet, when I asked at Cambridge, I said, how many of you out there have heard of the Bank for International Settlements? 3 hands went up. Yeah, exactly. I was with Tim Farron, my MP, only a few weeks ago. I asked him direct, have you heard of the Bank for International Settlements? No. I said, you're an MP and you don't know who they are? You're going to tell me, aren't you? Yes, I bloody well did tell him. Right. Now, these globalist banksters see us, the human race, as being on a treadmill that is going faster and faster. A treadmill of mass mindless production to meet mass mindless consumption, where the only real winners are the financial elite, the so-called 1%. Now look at this cartoon, I love it. And trouble is, it's so true. There you are, I won't read it, yeah, you can just read it, look at it. Yeah, happiness, eh? Just around the corner, happiness. Yeah, we can tell that. Yeah, exactly. Now you may be saying, what on earth is he bringing him up for? Florence of Arabia. I love him. I've been up there. I've met him 3 times now. He's in the adjoining constituency to where I live. Rory Stewart. Now, the reason I'm putting him up is because we've got these MPs in Parliament, okay? Many of them deny the existence of a new world order. And, you know, there's one question he can't answer. I said to him, I said, now, come on, Rory. I said, you are entitled to a private life, aren't you? He said, yes. I said, obviously, if you go to bed with one of the enemy agents or something like that and do a profumo on us, then we might be interested in your private life. But on the whole, we are happy for you to have a private life. Are you entitled to a private political life? Well, come on, private. And the interesting thing about talking to Rory, as soon as you start to talk to him and he gets excited, his voice goes up until he's actually squeaking at you. But anyway, that's another story. Now, the point is, this man has been to Bilderberg, Trilateral Commission, European Council on Foreign Relations, chairman of the Defence Select Committee, Foreign Affairs Select Committee he's a member of. He's a supporter of Saul Alinsky and Cameron's Big Society, and apparently went to Oxford and he was a summer tutor to Princes William and Harry. Oh, and the other thing was he dressed up in a funny costume and walked across Afghanistan or something, and for some reason the Taliban let him live. I don't know why. The point is, he is rather odd, but he is dangerous. Because that man is chairman of our Defence Select Committee, and yet he is a globalist, he's in bed with the globalist bankers, and he is talking behind closed doors with very powerful people and he is not accountable to his electorate. He's not telling them what's going on or nothing. No politician can be allowed a private political life, and that's a message we've got to drum across to them. Now, I'm only mentioning two people because I want to show you the extremes. That's one extreme. That's, if you like, the right-wing extreme, Tories, whatever. This one, it's nearer to home. He's Dave Prentice, General Secretary of Unison, man of the people. There he is, doing his stuff. What's that quote up there? How did our people already struggling become the scapegoats for financial mismanagement? 0-hour contracts, tripling in 1 year. A minimum wage which needs to be turned into a living wage. Not in 6 years, but now. Our people are suffering. In the 21st century, hard-working people are having to make absolutely appalling choices. Yes, I'm with him. Trouble is, he's a director of the Bank of England. And has been since June the 1st, 2012, and he runs out on the 31st of May in 2015. What is interesting is that when you go onto Wikipedia, no mention the fact he's a member of the Bank of England, director of the Bank of England. So what's he doing there? Anyway, I've asked him about the Bradbury and would he like to support me and, got nothing back. Can't think why. But we are going to concentrate on this because the Unison members probably don't even know he's a director of the Bank of England. And he's sitting at the table where these decisions affecting all of us are made. Okay, so we now come to the British solution that will transform for the good the entire banking and financial system of the world. I'm going to be quite quick because I'm conscious that time is running out and I've got to get a move on. So here we are. Welcome to the virtually unknown story of the Bradbury pound. And there's one of the early Bradbury pounds. And here's my hero, the Right Honourable Thomas Johnston, MP, Privy Councillor, ex-Lord Privy Councillor, author of The Financiers and the Nation. I've been holding it in my hand. There it is. You can't see it. It's a fabulous book. The Financiers and the Nation, primary source edition. You can go online and download it. It is brilliant. And it tells the truth. This guy, as I said, he's one of the few politicians who I have great admiration for. He was socialist, came from Scotland, Glasgow, joined the Second World War. He looked after Scottish affairs. He's gone down in history as being the father of the Scottish hydroelectric scheme. And basically, he was a good egg. I think that's what the phrase is. And here's the book. As I said, there's two different editions. You can go online, you go to bookshops, you can get it still, and it is available, but you can see it online. Now, at the outbreak of the First World War, there was suddenly a run on the banks. Suddenly, everyone wanted their gold out. And they could see that when we were supposed to be mobilizing for the war, which, by the way, is probably started by the bankers, but that's another story, suddenly we found ourselves on a crisis, a financial crisis. And that's the last thing when you're mobilizing you want. So David Lloyd George, here we go, David Lloyd George, he got the bankers went to see him, and he got them around the table and he said, right chaps, what are we going to do? And they came up with some ideas and Lloyd George said, okay, I'll agree to it. And in 2 days they got a Currency and Banknotes Act through Parliament, August 6, 1914, authorising the Treasury, not the Bank of England, the Treasury to issue money based on the credit and wealth of the nation. And this is the actual sign that went up in because they had a bank holiday on the Monday, but they extended the bank holiday until the 7th. In other words, I love this, members of the staff to be in attendance during business hours on these 3 days, on these days. So in other words, this is the manager saying, we're shutting up shop, we're not going to open our bank so there can be a run on the money. We're going to wait for the new notes, and here they are. On August 7th, 1914, the Treasury notes were available from the banks and the crisis was averted. And there they were. This is their very first batch, £1 and 10 shillings. They were printed on stamp paper on one side only. They were rough and ready. But if you think about it, that's an operation that was done in 3 days, and they got them out to all the banks. And so when the banks opened on the 7th, there was no run on the banks. Everyone was happy to take these notes because they knew that they were debt-free based on the wealth and credit of the nation. And this is what my friend, old Thomas Johnston, said about this. He said, this new currency had been issued by the state, was backed by the credit of the state, and was issued to the banks to prevent the banks from utter collapse. The public cheerfully accepted the new notes, and nobody talked about inflation. But suddenly, David Lloyd George had second thoughts. Why? They printed about £300 million worth of these things in 1914. It was all going swimmingly well. And suddenly David Lloyd George said, oh, hang on a moment, we'll go back to what we were doing before. We will sell bonds into the bond market, and the bankers who create money out of thin air as debt will buy these, and we'll put them at 3.5%, 4.5%, 5% interest, and all the rest of it. And in a nutshell, we were suddenly going into big debt. I think if I remember rightly, I think I've got my figures here. I think the national debt in 1914 was £650 million. The national debt at the end of the Second World War in 1919 at the Treaty of Versailles was 1,750 million. I think I've got my figures right, but you can see what's happened. It's just gone woof. So basically, the bankers were allowed to make a killing out of the killing. But many of you will say, what's new? Because they still do it today. Bradbury pound was debt-free and interest-free money issued by HM Treasury based on the credit, wealth and potential of the British nation. Today, the British nation is valued by the Office of National Statistics as being worth well over £23 trillion. And of that, 17 trillion is the potential of our labour force. I'm not suggesting for one moment if anyone in the room thinks we're going to print 23, well, we're not. But the point is, that is what we're valued at. Now, if we were to restore the debt-free Bradbury pound, these are sort of things we would do. A universal basic income scheme could be introduced to replace much of the complex and invasive welfare and benefit system. The NHS would have no deficit or funding difficulties to meet its needs. Student fees would be abolished. Education at all levels would be free. The armed services would be restored to a level where our nation's security and sovereignty is not dependent on other nations' armed forces. People would have real and practical help in setting up their own human-scale businesses, whilst at the same time greatly increasing the number of apprenticeships for young people. Shipbuilding and other traditional heavy industries would be given a new lease of life. But roads, railways, power stations and other vital infrastructure for the nation will be maintained and constructed to a very high standard by British companies. With the Bradbury pound restored, austerity would become a thing of the past. The national debt and the deficit, as they have both been arrived at by the use of planned, provable fraud, would be annulled by common law through the use of jury nullification. Under no circumstances would the Bradbury pound be used to pay off proven criminality. The Bank of England would leave the Bank for International Settlements with immediate effect and would be absorbed completely into HM Treasury. The City of London will forfeit its unique privileges, including the position of remembrancer in the House of Commons, and will go through a period of intensive re-evaluation and reform. And finally, Glass-Steagall, the separation of the high street banks from the more risky investment banks, would be an immediate priority. Now, this is important. In the event of a sudden global crash of the financial markets, which is looking increasingly likely as the crazy global derivatives market debt bubble approaches $1 quadrillion, an electronic debt-free and interest-free Bradbury pound could, in seconds, be implemented by HMG through HM Treasury to underpin the entire lawful, and I emphasise the word lawful, British economy. Such a move would maintain the liquidity needed for a successful and flourishing economy free from the banksters that would meet the needs, security and happiness of the British people. And to prevent any sort of Weimar Republic hyperinflation situation from happening, intelligent and targeted taxation will be drawn up and implemented by HMG to prevent the economy from overheating, thus preventing any sort of serious inflation. Now, we need to mention the Weimar Republic because our critics, if they dare, will use that as an example. Oh, you just print money, you have a Weimar Republic. I know all that. Yeah. And they go on about you need a lawnmower, you need a barrow full of money to pay for a loaf of bread. We've seen all that, and it's all true. Look, the Reichsbank note, what is it, 5 million marks? I mean, yes, it just went silly. But you need to know the truth about what actually happened. For a start, it was not the Weimar Republic's treasury issuing the money. It was this fellow, here we go again, Hajar. I knew I should have had a drink before I came on. Anyway, president of the Reichsbank, the magic of money in 1967, he confessed it. He said, yes, it was the private central bank that was issuing all the money. And it was basically the currency speculators in Wall Street and the City of London that caused the hyperinflation. It was nothing to do with Treasury issued money by the Weimar Republic. So it's a complete, it's just crazy. So when they say you print lots of money, you get hyperinflation. No, you don't. Not if you have intelligent taxation to take the heat out. As long as you've got the right amount of liquidity to ensure a successful economy. Now, the political responses so far, I love this one. Let's see if you're more intelligent than I am. Now, this is from John Redwood. Now, I better explain for those who don't know. John Redwood was a director of Rothschild's in London. So, he's been in with the lads. But I took this from his website, from his blog. Why the Authorities Are Not Issuing Bradbury Pounds by John Redwood, published June the 21st, 2014. Following a request, I have now reminded myself of the so-called Bradbury Pounds. It is a very similar device to creating money and buying gilts through the Bank of England, a nationalised bank, which is therefore backed by and working with the Treasury. The authorities do not think it would be a good idea to print more money now, as it could prove inflationary. When they did choose to print, they did so by a different route, which did not make a lot of difference to the idea. Buying up government bonds allowed them to spend more in the public sector without facing a debt or interest rate constraint on their spending. Well, for those of us who attempt to try and understand quantitative easing, which I think he's referring to, wasn't it the private banks who were getting all the money? Not much of it was going into the economy, was it? Am I right? Yeah. So, dear old John Redwood, he also doesn't like being asked about the Bank for International Settlements. I've written to him a few times asking him about the Bank for International Settlements and what goes on at this meeting, and is our Canadian friend, what's he called? I've forgotten his name. Carney, how can I forget him? Old Carnage, yes. Is he answerable to Osborne or is he answerable to the people at the top of the tower? Don't come back to me, but don't answer. And then we had this letter from the Treasury Committee. Dear Mr Walker, thank you for your letter of 11th of April addressed to Mr Julian Tyree MP regarding the Bradbury Pound. Your letter has been passed to me for reply. And I apologise for the time it has taken to get back to you. It only took about 3 prompts from me in about 5 weeks. I appreciate you taking the time to... I hate it when they write that, don't you? I appreciate the time, yeah. I appreciate you taking the time to raise your ideas for reintroducing the Bradbury Pound. However, the committee has a full programme at present. We are currently I can't read the bloody thing. We are currently conducting inquiries into quantitative easing and macro-prudential tools. Hands up who knows about macro-prudential tools. Right, I'm in the same boat, that's all right. Among other matters. As such, this Treasury Committee has no plans to look into this subject in the foreseeable future. Similarly, the committee is unlikely to carry out an inquiry into the Bank for International Settlements. I'm not bloody surprised about that. Your request for a meeting with the members of the committee has been passed to the chairman's office, and a response on this point will be sent to you in due course. No, it hasn't. I'm still waiting for it. Thank you again for taking... Oh, I wish they wouldn't stop thanking me. Thank you again for taking the trouble to write to the Commons. I am sorry that I cannot provide a more positive response. And it's apparently signed by Eldon Gallagher, wait for it, the committee assistant. Nice to know I got to the people at the top. Right, let's look at this bunch. David Cameron, George Osborne, Ed Miliband, Ed Balls, Nick Clegg and Danny Alexander, and I'm including Nigel Farage. Now, they all believe that we have to win and succeed in this global economic race. How many times you heard them say in the Commons, we've got to invest hard now, we're in this race together, we're going to lose. Oh, it goes on and on and on and on. Whose race is it? It is the system's race. It is the race for the Bank for International Settlements, the race for the banksters, the Rothschilds. It's not our race. So I'm not going to take part. And that's what the central part of our message. We are not going to take part. It's going to be a very simple message to put across to people once they understand that we can issue our own money debt-free, interest-free. Nigel Farage, this is a great disappointment. He is a City of London man. He was in the commodities market. I've written on numerous occasions saying, come on, please support the Bradbury Pound. Great, great opportunity. I can't get my head around this. They are the UK Independent Party. Right. Well, if you're going to be genuinely independent, you should be able to control your own money supply, issue and control your own money supply. Common sense, isn't it? Well, why doesn't Nigel see it? And exactly. So, yeah, sorry? Precisely. But the trouble is, he's got a good people, our natural allies, working there who don't realise that. They've got to be told. And here's what else is coming. The Trans-Pacific Partnership, TPP, the Transatlantic Trade and Investment Partnership, TTIP, the Trade in Services Agreement, TISA, all done secretly. Bottom line is, corporations are to be made more powerful than sovereign nations. But this is the bit. The fight back has started. And it is based around our lawful demand to restore our absolute right to issue and control our own sovereign, debt-free and interest-free money supply, free from outside criminal influences. And here we are, Budget Day, Bradbury Day, 2014. I had a lovely story. I'm going to tell you this story. Some of you may have heard it before. I got talking, the police actually were pretty decent on the day. I think they tried to corral us. They tried to limit what we could do. We had a very nice chap who came up and said, "Are we doing everything all right for you? Can we help you?" You know, acting as a, that's what do they call it, PA, PR, whatever it is, yeah. Anyway, I got talking to a two-pipper job, chief inspector job, and we got talking, and he was sympathetic about the Bradbury, and we got chatting and a bit of banter and everything else, and he was getting on. He was happy with how I was responding and everything else. And I suddenly went serious on him. I said, "Look, I'm very sorry, but you are cramping our style. We came here to do one thing today." He said, "What's that?" I said, "We just wanted to hang one MP." I said, "Now look, we're being reasonable, just one." And he just said, he did this. I swear to God, he did this. He went, "Wait, look, I'm going off for lunch in 15 minutes. How long do you need?" Now, obviously after Plebgate and all the other things, and in fairness, the police were taking our leaflets, and I could see them reading. I bet we were being talked about, because the good coppers are waking up to what's going on. We have an early day motion signed by Austin Mitchell and Jeremy Corbyn and 3 others. Not a great deal. I mean, a lot of MPs write saying, "Oh, I'm not interested in early day motions. I don't bother with those, they don't come to anything." The fact is, it's given us some credibility, so hats off to Austin Mitchell and to others. Give credit, give credence, good stuff. And we are organising. The British Constitution, UK column, here we are. I mean, bear in mind, I was showing this slide to Cambridge to alert them to the fact that things were happening. So it was good for morale and saying, look, we are fighting back. And here we are. Here's now, you mentioned Tom, wasn't it? There we are, there's pictures of Tom, there's the one in Blackburn. I love that bottom right-hand picture. I don't know who did it, because it wasn't me, I'm not clever enough to do things like that. But I thought Mr. Carney holding up a sign saying, "Bring back the Bradbury pound." Yes, I'm sure that will do his health a lot of good. But anyway, the point is, we are 2015, the year of lawful rebellion, Bradbury pound, 100 years of Magna Carta. We need to organise now, and I'm being serious now, really serious. Response and what Guy's team members and what then Roger and everyone are doing is fantastic, helping people when they need help most. But we've all got to get off our backsides. We've got to organise flying columns armed with the truth and confront the MPs, confront all the wrongdoers who we know haven't got. The last thing they want is to have a camera thrust in their face and say, "Excuse me, what are you going to do about the Bradbury pound? Excuse me, what are you going to do about child abuse? Excuse me, what are you going to..." Because we have now got to get the alternative media filled with our stuff. People are waking up. When they do wake up, they come onto our side. They're not coming onto their side. I mean, the real wrongdoers amount to no more than 0.0001% of the population. Okay, we aren't huge in our numbers, but every day hundreds are waking up. Now, in my job, working for a regional newspaper, I talk to hundreds of people. And yes, people now are totally cheesed off with the bankers, completely cheesed off with the politicians. The child abuse and all that is coming out. people are, it's like it's turning a supertanker. People are starting to say, hang on a moment, something appears to be really rotten. Yesterday they had that election for the police crime, the chap who resigned over what happened. Yeah. And I think they got a 14% turnout. And the BBC 5 Live, they were talking about it on the radio, and they said, well, you know, this is proof now that the electorate really have disconnected from the politicians. And we know that's true. But what we've got to give now, I don't like to use the word hope, but that's not it. We need to show them the truth, and we need to show them the way we have got to go as a nation to take back our sovereignty. So, and when the British nation embraces this simple principle of national credit, every nation on earth in a very short period of time will go the same way. Common law, common sense, common decency, and complete simplicity will win the day. We are here to stop the unlawful corporate takeover of our sovereign nation. We are here to restore our democracy, our laws and traditions, and our absolute right to be happy, peaceful, and prosperous. 2015, next year, the year the British Lion shook off his chains and the British people took back their sovereignty from the criminals, traitors, and paedophiles. Go to it, my friends, and thank you.
Oh. Amazing, thank you, Justin. Excellent follow-up to Guy, I think. We will have one question because we've got a very short break. Go for it.
Yeah, I'd like to ask Justin, obviously you've introduced the concept of the Bradbury House, which is great. I'm more interested in the People's Bank, which is the lawful bank, because we know the sovereignty MPs, when they are elected, they have a contract. Their contract, as you know, is made with the Crown.
Yeah.
Absolutely no other trustees whatsoever now. The whole system is corrupt. So surely, if you want a banking system, you need a People's Bank.
Right. Okay, I hear what you're saying. Right, let's get this. The people I talk to are very strict about this. If we have too much money going into the system from all different angles, you will get inflation, hyperinflation. We've not got to go down the path of the Weimar Republic, Zimbabwe, or anywhere else. It is up to a government to control the liquidity going into the economy. Now, I take your point, the present bunch are dreadful. But the present bunch are going. Because when the Bradbury comes in, it'll be our people who have brought it in. I'm going to tell you something now which I believe to be true. I believe that 2 years from now, our mindset, and that's the mindset of decency, common law, common sense, will be in power. It's like the rainfall coming down. It's massive. The rainfall is coming down. The truth is coming down. And it's been soaked up by the people. People are starting to wake up. Suddenly, there is a landslip. When that landslip happens, that's when the big change comes. Now, it's just going to happen. I won't be Prime Minister. Brian, in fact, I want to get on my model railway. Brian wants to get, none of us here have got political ambitions. I certainly do not. But I do believe the right people, the good people, will come to the fore. And we are going to put so many safeguards in place. For a start, political parties should be abolished. We should have a parliament made up of independent MPs. And to even be a candidate, you must first of all have gone in front of a randomly selected jury of ordinary decent people who will find out who you are. Yeah. The point is, people should be there to serve. Sorry? I agree, because the whole point, agreed with you, because the City of London, the Crown, everything is going to be dismantled because the criminals have run the show. We have got to replace it with a completely transparent, accountable, democratic system. I'm not going to be the one to decide on it. Probably none of us are. Others will come forward. But we are going to lay down the ground rules to make sure we never have a repeat of what has happened now. The criminals will have nowhere to go. I'm going to say this. This issue about national credit is black and white. It's not a case of, well, we'll have a bit of this and we'll have a bit of that. As soon as you do that, you allow the system back in. The system, the greedy bastards, the psychopaths, the sociopaths, the 4% who are capable of this will want back in. We are not to give them that way back. So the system has to be devised for honourable, decent people to prevail at all times.
Thank you very much, Justin. We have all the information now, so there's no excuse. I speak.